My name is Val Marie Turner, and I serve as an assistant county administrator with Loudoun County government. And I want to first start off by congratulating the winners of the books. The Community Foundation will be sending the books out to you. And I'm so excited that I have the distinct honor and privilege of moderating our second panel this morning. And we're going to be focused on diversity in housing. So let's get right into our session. And let me start off with a pretty telling fact. And please listen to this. One of the most high impact predictors of health is the zip code of your home. Let me repeat that. One of the most high impact predictors of health is the zip code of your home. Housing availability and housing policies has a long history in the timeline of racial equity. As I hope you all are aware, Loudoun County has been focused on addressing unmet housing needs as the Board of Supervisors just approved the county's first ever unmet housing needs strategic plan in September. This plan provides a number of tools to increase housing opportunities across the continuum. And today we have two affordable housing experts here to help us dig into why these unmet housing needs exist or continue to exist. Let me tell you a little bit about both of them. First, we have Erica. Erica Sims. Erica serves as the president of HD Advisors, a Virginia-based affordable housing consulting firm. Ms. Sims oversees a number of projects related to affordable housing production, policy, and management. Erica has worked in the nonprofit management, affordable housing development, and in community organizing fields for over 20 years. Her focus has been social and economic justice through housing and economic development. Next, we also have with us Nikki Diadamo-Damery. She serves as the community coordinator for HDA's community land trust clients, focused on shared equity homeownership models for equitable development. Please join me in welcoming both Erica and Nikki. Erica, I'd like to start the discussion with you, if you don't mind. Help us kind of build some background. In so many historic instances, real estate and homeownership have been at the heart of inequality and systemic racism for years. One of the most notable in the history is redlining, and as well as the acceptable practices of the National Association of Real Estate Board. For those of us that are new to this phrase and its history, can you help provide some background?
Sure. Thank you, Val-Marie. So redlining has a formal technical meaning, but it's also come to mean a very general way in which we have segregated our geographies. So for example, think about our neighborhoods. What are Black neighborhoods and what are white neighborhoods in your community? And think about your own community. How did those get to be that way? How could a neighborhood be Black or white? How could a neighborhood have color? And yet they do, don't they? This segregation is not natural, and it's not based on our personal preferences to only live with like people of color. It is structurally designed. And then it's also, most importantly, currently upheld through new policies that unfortunately you and I implement every day and reinforce this imbalance in resources. It feeds into our schools, which are neighborhood-based, our access to transportation, the quality of our housing and the quality of our jobs. And that makes it connect back to what you said previously about our health, our most fundamental need for good health. So just a brief explanation of formal redlining. This goes back to the New Deal, and it was a program that was the expansion of government insured home loans, really to build that American middle class. Sounds amazing, but the government created maps to evaluate the risk of that insurance. And one of the key indicators they used to assess mortgage risk was race, the racial composition of a neighborhood. And they drew a red line around the neighborhoods that had in their minds, a sufficient number of Black households that would diminish the value of that mortgage. And thereby they effectively reinforced racial, spatial segregation. And it's the primary reason why we have a racial wealth gap today, because starting 90 years ago, white households had government supported funding to buy homes. And we know that the wealth accumulation in homes is generational. And so that massive amount of head start, forget about the several hundred years before then when there wasn't even access to land ownership for African Americans, but this is continued to be perpetuated today. And the racial wealth gap today is just as large as it was when the Civil Rights Act was passed.
Wow, thank you so much, Erica. And just as a follow-up to that, when you talked about the New Deal, that was the creation of the Federal Housing Administration, correct?
Right.
So let me kind of put this in perspective. So, Erica, if I earned $1,000 a month, how much could I safely afford to spend on rent or mortgage and still be able to put food on the table, pay for childcare and other expenses?
So $1,000 a month doesn't get you very far for any of your expenses. And that is basically the poverty line. That's $12,000 a year. That's what folks are living on if they live on Social Security. So a lot of our seniors live near that rate of income. And honestly, it doesn't leave you enough funds every month to pay for your basic food, medical, and housing needs. But the general rule of thumb we have in the housing world is that you should really spend no more than 30% of your gross income on rent a month. So that a person who earns $1,000 a month really needs to be paying $300 in order to be able to have enough to pay the rest of their way.
Wow, and being familiar with Loudoun County, that's virtually impossible
Right.
here. So let me take another step as we talk about Alice, the Alice report from United Way. So in that report, it estimates that 27% of Loudoun's population are cost burdened, paying more than the 30% threshold that you talked about. Now, I understand that HDA has helped to develop and work with jurisdictions around Virginia to develop tools and innovative programs to meet unmet housing needs, especially for marginalized communities. One of those tools is the Community Land Trust. Can you explain how that works?
Yes, so a community land trust is really a way to reclaim affordable homeownership in a permanent, collective way. And so there are now 3 community land trusts in Virginia, and one most recently that was created with our help is the Virginia statewide community land trust. So as a statewide community land trust, that means that now community land trust housing is available anywhere in our state. And that makes Virginia pretty unique. In particular, there is a Loudoun Habitat for Humanity that intends to use this statewide community land trust to create community land trust housing right in Loudoun County. And community land trust housing is deeply affordable home ownership that is permanently affordable. So what it intends to do is create a portfolio of homes in our communities that will never be completely subject to the market. They will be an opportunity to generate wealth, but some of that wealth will be left in the home for the next homeowner, because we know that many of our neighborhoods become completely gentrified, completely out of reach for many segments, not just the lowest income people in our communities, but many of the middle income people in our communities. And so a community land trust is really a way to address that.
Thank you, Erica. I know for us at Loudoun County in particular, that's one of the tools that we did put into our unmet housing needs strategic plan, because we think it's such a valuable tool, and we've already reached out to Habitat. So we're looking towards having a greater conversation about that. So thank you for that. So can you also help me with co-location? And can you share some of the examples around Virginia with co-location projects you've seen?
Sure. So co-location is when you are serving people with what is called in the industry special needs. These are individuals that may have chronic illness, they may have mental illness, they may have physical disabilities. They need more than, they definitely need affordable housing. They need housing that they can afford, just like we all need housing that we can afford, but they also need additional services, whether that be case management, medical services, drug and alcohol treatment services. And what has become a best practice around the country is to co-locate those within the housing. And so it's considered wraparound services that you really support someone to be able to live stably and to really thrive in their housing, because they're getting all of their needs met, their health needs, as well as their housing needs met. And I think one of my favorite examples of this is in Richmond, Virginia. It's the Caritas development. And I consider this to be part of Richmond's infrastructure, just like we try to build beautiful parks and stadiums. We have built a $27 million facility that is multi-phase to take people from drug and alcohol addiction all the way up through stable housing. And the program is under one roof, but takes people from all of these stages to the point where they are really living independently and thriving. And it provides them with everything they need at these various stages of their recovery, so that ultimately they are able to go on and live independently. And I just consider that to be such an amazing resource and part of our infrastructure, that we can have that for our community.
Yeah, that is absolutely an amazing resource. I definitely like to know more about that. The permanent supportive housing program is a little similar, but it doesn't provide all of the different wraparound services on site. So
Right.
kudos to Richmond. So can you also share with us some of the straightforward as well as innovative mechanism jurisdictions are using to fund unmet housing needs programs and services?
Yeah, so I'm really partial to the community land trust model because I do think that it's a really radical way to think about homeownership, to really think about it as a collective good. How do you take something that is about individual financial gain and collectivize it and say, we will not win this race if we don't have a collective pool of homes that are building wealth for people, but also preserving affordability? And can you have both of those things under one roof? And I think the other amazing thing about community land trust is that they address the racial wealth gap, because they can really target their this resource to buyers that have not been served previously by the homeownership market, and really can they have proven to be excellent tools in creating wealth for households of color. I think another thing that I'm really paying a lot of attention to, that I'm excited about, is potential legislation at the state level that's being sponsored by the Virginia Poverty Law Center and Senator Ghazala Hashmi. So that is called the Reparative Home Program. And it is a program that is designed to provide really significant homeownership funding for households, low-income households who have been historically excluded from the housing market. Their hope is to have a pilot up and running in Richmond after the next legislative session, and then to ultimately move it out throughout the whole state. And it's modeled in part on some of the exciting things that are happening around the country, like in Evanston, Illinois. It's definitely different. It's its own beast that's been honed over time. And I think it's a great, it could be a great model for the whole country, actually. And then the last example I'll bring up is There's a community-led nonprofit called Virginia Community Voice, and they have created an equitable development scorecard, which was created by community members, not practitioners in the housing world. And it is something I would really like to see adopted throughout the whole state as a requirement for new developments, whether those be affordable housing or not, to really bring community control back into the development process. I think that it's a great model for that.
Wow, that sounds so interesting, and you can bet that I will be researching more. So, Eric, if you don't mind, I'm going to switch to Nikki, but I am going to come back to you with some additional questions. So, thank you. So, Nikki, I'm going to switch to you right now. I know one of your primary roles with HDA is also policy development. Can you share some of the legislative advocacy work that you've seen at the state level as well as on the local level?
Yes, thank you. Most of my work has been focused on how to develop limited equity kind of housing and the policies that might be needed for those developments. And in that regard, there are several policy, small policy tweaks that we've been seeing happen that have really helped. And one has to do with if you're a community land trust, and you own a home in a community land trust in the state of Virginia, most jurisdictions, your tax assessment is based on the market, and so you're taxed on the market value of your home. Of course, with a community land trust home, we are removing the home from the market, and the homeowner can never extract all of the market equity. So the legislation that passed a couple of years ago really limits what jurisdictions can tax a CLT homeowner on based on what they can sell their house for. It's one of the mechanisms that, along with the way the community land trust works, helps to preserve the affordability for the homeowner. So that's a really important one. One I think we're hoping to work on and get passed soon would actually be for the whole state would be a tax, make the land tax exempt. And that happens in some jurisdictions, but not all for community land trust based on their other side jobs, the organization's side jobs. So those are a couple things I think that are important. I also think, inclusionary housing policy is a great tool that can be utilized more fully, especially in partnership with community land trusts. In Colorado, community land trusts, there's a big CLT out in Colorado that's really taken advantage of those programs in cities that have inclusionary housing policies, and all of the affordable housing that is created by those inclusionary housing policies do end up in the land trust to preserve the affordability permanently. So those are, I think, some important ones. Yeah, a good place to start at least.
Oh, awesome. Listen, when we talk about taxes in particular as relates to affordable housing, we know that that's a part of our payment, principal, interest, tax, and insurance, right? So anything that we can do to assist our low-income families in particular, it's key. So the community land trust legislation that was passed, it's going to be really key for us, particularly in Loudoun County, as we try to create more opportunities for affordable housing. So I know Erica mentioned the reparative home ownership program. Do you want to get into that a little more from your perspective on how this approach works and provide some additional details for us? I think that would be great.
Yeah, so the reparative homeownership program in Richmond is really based, it really focuses on people that can trace a loss of land, basically to redlining. It requires quite a bit of documentation, but it does allow funds to be really targeted and generous, I think, with regard to this kind of program. I think especially when it's paired with a community land trust model. You know, one of the critiques of a community land trust is that low-income homeowners can't extract the full wealth of the home. It does, again, provide an entry place for people to have home ownership in future generations, but it's a trade-off. I feel like when it's paired with the reparative program, it does allow homeowners, especially those who've experienced land loss due to redlining and wealth loss due to redlining, to be able to recoup some of that as equity, as cash equity in their home that's not part of the community land trust model. So even the hope is that this program will be able to be used for community land trust homes as well as conventional market homes, and enable people to, extract their even more wealth from that they had been robbed of in past generations. So,
Well, thank you, Nikki. And as you can tell, when we're trying to create opportunities and create diverse housing types, we absolutely have to ensure that we have a number of different tools in our toolbox in order for this to be successful. So along with that, I've heard a lot about lease to own programs. What can you tell us about lease to own programs, and have you seen some success in other areas?
Yes, we've done a lot of research on lease to own. We have the Maggie Walker Community Land Trust in Richmond have piloted a small lease to own program within the CLT that is still ongoing. And we've talked to a lot of people locally who have done lease to own programs and no longer do it. We've talked to other community land trusts around the country who have them ongoing and have not done them. I'd say they're complicated. I think there's a lot of potential for them. We have 4 participants in our first program. I suspect that at least 3 of them are going to be purchasing soon, and we'll see about the other person. I do think when you're working with families at this income level, where all of the families in our program are single parents, they are making less than 50% of AMI. And, that comes with a lot of challenges that we all kind of know about, but until we're dealing with people one-on-one who are trying to make things work for their family, trying to get into home ownership, trying to make that last step, the last work they need to do with their credit, everything kind of has to align perfectly. So I think what we're learning is that these programs have the potential to be very successful. They need a lot more wraparound services. It's not just credit counseling. It takes a lot more. The potential homeowners require a lot more work on our part for other kinds of support, medical support, emotional support, other kinds of potential financial support. I think it's a great program. I do think it, right now, I don't know if we'll be able to scale it up. I think it may need to be small so that it can be successful for the homeowners who are, for the participants who are in the program now. So it does have potential, but I think it's, and it can take longer than maybe we thought it would take initially. So I think it can be done. I think it's a great program, but it is quite a bit of work.
So it's labor intensive, but there's still another tool in the toolbox. So I have one last question, and Erica or Nikki, either one of you could chime in on this. So if I'm working with a foundation or a corporation, what can I do to support the progress of this work? And what are some of the key strategies that individuals can do? Either one of you.
You can go first, Erica.
Say one thing and then pass it over to you, Nikki. I mean, we have never been at a time in my career, and really the career of people who are 30 years older than me, where we have had this much funding for affordable housing from the federal, state, and local level. We are at a high watermark, which is amazing. But there's one thing that we need to pair with that, and that is land. if we don't have the property to build this, and the one thing that stops us, well, many things stop us, zoning, all sorts of things. But the one thing that individuals could do that is a big barrier is one of our biggest problems is NIMBY. And so go out to a meeting at your local city council and stand in support of the next affordable housing development rather than against it. And I consider that a vote for racial justice, for an inclusive community. And yes, you can find all sorts of reasons why you don't want housing built there. There is going to be more traffic. There are going to be more kids going to that school, but this is the way we build better communities. And that's my suggestion for how you can go out and make a difference.
Thank you. And just for those that are listening, NIMBY is an acronym that we often use, not in my backyard. So, all right, Nikki, turn it over to you.
That's a really great advice, Erica. And I think also, I mean, continue the idea about investing in land. You know, if you have money to invest, that land investment for affordable housing, especially if it's permanent affordable housing, is going to, that initial investment now is going to multiply over the years if we can really secure those assets for permanently affordable housing. Again, making yourself, the more I really think we need to be working towards reparative justice and working towards those policies that have dollars attached to them. And I think, you know, finding out more about that and advocating for that, because it's not always a popular conversation, and getting behind that is a really important piece, again, as an individual. So.
Thank you, and I agree with you as well. Amy, do we have time for questions from the audience? I know that we're kind of running tight, so.
We are running tight, and
Okay.
actually, Nikki and Erica really, they hit those chords with their most recent answers. And that is local advocacy is such a critical piece right now. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Amy. And Erica and Nikki, thank you ladies so much for your contributions and for your comments and just for the work that you do, and know that it is not going unnoticed. Myself as a housing advocate as well, hats off to you and all that you do. And again, Amy, thank you for having all of us and talking about this most important topic. And so